They said I was just dead weight, a burden in my own family. I raised my son with everything I had, gave them a home, cooked their meals, even helped raise their daughter. But the day I overheard my daughter-in-law say I was taking up space, something inside me broke. That's when I stopped being quiet and started planning my exit. You spend your life giving, first to your husband, then to your child. And when he grows up, you think, maybe now, just maybe he'll understand what it cost you. But no, that understanding never comes. My name is Helen. I'm 75 years old. I've got silver gray hair, a bad hip, and a heart that still wants to believe the people I love aren't cruel. But that belief started dying the day my son married Emily. It didn't happen overnight. At first I thought she was just adjusting. It's not easy to live with your husband's mother under the same roof. I understood that. I tried to stay out of the way. I kept quiet. I cooked the meals, did the laundry, cleaned the bathrooms. No one else seemed to notice. But as time passed, her cold glances turned into sharp comments, and those comments turned into something worse. It wasn't that I wanted to live with them. I had my own home once. My husband and I bought it when we were young. A small house with faded shutters and creaky floors. It was full of memories. But after he passed, the maintenance became too much. I fell on the stairs once and fractured my wrist. That's when David insisted I move in with him and Emily. We have the space, Mom, he said. You'll be safer with us. Besides, Emma would love having Grandma around. Emma, my granddaughter. She was the only one who ever made me feel wanted in that house. She'd come into my room just to talk, or ask for help with her art projects. She reminded me that love could still live in a place that had turned cold. But David, he stopped noticing. Or maybe he chose not to see it. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished folding laundry, and was heading toward the kitchen to start dinner meatloaf. David's favorite, when I heard voices in the hallway. She doesn't do anything, David. She just takes up space. She's dead weight. Emily's voice, sharp, cruel. She's your mother, Em. Well, she's not mine. I didn't walk into the kitchen after that. I turned back to my room and sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from the sheer shock of it. Dead weight. That's what I had become. Not a person, not a mother. Not the woman who had stayed up all night when David had the flu at 7 years old. Not the one who held his hand when he sobbed after his first heartbreak. No, just excess. A burden. That night at dinner, no one said a word about it. David acted like nothing happened. Emily smiled that tight little smile she always gave me when company was around. And I served them their plates, poured the iced tea and swallowed the lump in my throat. But something had changed inside me. It was quiet at first, like the click of a lock being turned from the inside. A realization I don't have to stay here. The next day I opened the drawer where I kept my husband's old file folders. I hadn't touched them in years, but I knew exactly what I was looking for. I found the envelope labeled Wills and Accounts. Inside were copies of the living trust we had set up before he died. David didn't know about all of it. We had separate arrangements. Accounts his father never merged, because back then we didn't know how long his illness would last, and we didn't want the house or my share of what little retirement we had getting caught in any mess. But there it was, my name, on the deed, on the accounts, on the trust. And just like that I remembered I had options. That night I sat by the window in my small room and stared out into the backyard. The oak tree David had planted when he was 12 still stood tall, but the house didn't feel like home anymore. I started making a plan, not out of revenge, not yet, but out of dignity, out of self-respect. If I had truly become invisible in their eyes, then maybe they wouldn't even notice when I took back what was mine. The first step, visiting my old lawyer, Margaret, downtown. She was retired now but still took clients on a referral basis. I took the bus to her office the following week. No one asked where I was going. No one cared that I was gone. Margaret still recognized me the second I stepped through her office door. We hugged. She made me tea, and when I told her everything, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Helen, if they don't value you, then you take what's yours and walk away, with your head held high." We spent hours going through paperwork. She helped me confirm the accounts were still active. The trust had grown over time, more than I thought. I had enough to live on, comfortably even. More importantly, I had enough to leave. That night I tucked Emma into bed. She told me about her science fair project and asked me if we could make brownies tomorrow. I smiled and said yes, even though I already knew I wouldn't be there. The next few days I moved quietly. I made copies of documents, called moving companies, found a small cottage on the other side of town listed for rent by a widow named Judy. I paid the deposit in cash, and then, when everything was lined up, I cooked one last dinner: roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, carrots glazed in honey. Emma's favorite meal. At the table I served everyone with a gentle smile. I watched as David scrolled on his phone. Emily barely looked up. Only Emma said thank you. I sat down with my plate, looked around the table, and finally said, "This will be my last dinner here." David blinked. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. Calm. Certain. "I'm moving out tomorrow morning. I've signed a lease on a new place. I'll be taking my savings and inheritance with me. All of it." Emily froze, her fork midair. David stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "I thought this was what you wanted," I said softly. "After all, I'm just dead weight, remember?" The silence was delicious. I looked at Emma and gave her a small smile. "I'll still pick you up from school if you want. We can bake in my new kitchen." David opened his mouth to protest, but I stood up, collected my plate, and walked back to the kitchen. That was just the beginning. You see, they thought I was weak, that I had nowhere else to go, that I needed them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. You don't really know what people think of you until they stop pretending. I used to believe I had a place in my son's life. I was his mother, after all. I gave him everything I could, but when you hear someone call you dead weight in your own home, something inside you dies. Something tender, something trusting, and once it dies, it doesn't come back. The morning after my final dinner in that house, I packed my things while the rest of the family slept. It didn't take long. Most of my belongings fit into 3 suitcases and a few storage boxes. The handmade quilt from my wedding, the old photo albums, my sewing kit, though not my sewing machine. They had thrown that out 2 months earlier to make room for Emily's treadmill. I'd found it in pieces by the curb. They didn't even tell me. I kept my movements quiet. No slamming drawers, no stomping, just calm, quiet steps, dignity. By 7:30 a.m., the moving van pulled up in front. I had called a local company owned by 2 older brothers, James and Kenny, salt-of-the-earth types. One look at my face and they knew not to ask questions. They carried my boxes with care, even complimented the floral pattern on my suitcase. I appreciated that. I was halfway through loading when Emma came into the driveway, barefoot, in her pajamas, clutching her sketchpad. "Grandma?" she whispered. I stopped. My heart clenched. I hadn't planned on saying goodbye like this. Not here, not with her standing in the morning chill. I crouched down to her level and opened my arms. She ran into them. "Where are you going?" she asked into my shoulder. I held her tighter than I ever had. "I got a new place, sweetheart," I told her gently. "Just a little house across town. You can visit any time." She pulled back, her bottom lip trembling. "Did Mommy make you leave?" That question cut deeper than anything. Emily ever said to my face. No, baby, I lied. It was just time. I'll still be in your life, I promise. She nodded and hugged me again. Then she handed me her sketch pad. I drew this for you. On the first page was a picture of us sitting side by side, sewing a little red dress for her doll. The sun was shining in the background. Her handwriting below said, "Best grandma ever." I nearly broke down right there in the driveway. I kissed her forehead. You keep this. I'll come back for more drawings soon. I slipped away before David or Emily came out of the house. I didn't need a fake goodbye. Judy, the widow who rented me her back cottage, met me with a smile and warm banana bread. Her house was a yellow bungalow with climbing roses and a stone walkway. The guest cottage was small but bright, with lace curtains and a vintage stove. It smelled like lavender and lemon polish. I unpacked slowly, taking my time. Every item I placed on a shelf was like stitching a new life together, one piece at a time. That evening, I sat on the front porch with a glass of iced tea and listened to the crickets. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe, but I wasn't done yet. See, they didn't just throw out my sewing machine. They threw away the one thing that gave me purpose. I had been making clothes since I was 15. My hands knew stitches better than they knew silence. When I was raising David, I'd saved money by sewing his school uniforms, his Halloween costumes. I even made Emily's wedding veil, and they tossed it in the trash like it was nothing. But I hadn't forgot. I went to a second-hand shop the next day and bought a used machine, an old Singer model with a few dents and scratches. It wasn't much to look at, but it worked. The first stitch I made on it felt like coming home. That night, I took a walk through the neighborhood and saw a little flyer taped to the grocery store window. Local makers market, vendors wanted. That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't going to just sit and sew for myself. I was going to build something they couldn't take away or throw out. I spent the next 2 weeks sewing every day, every night. Aprons, baby quilts, reusable shopping bags, embroidered dish towels. I stitched until my fingers ached. Judy brought over tea and lemon bars, cheering me on like it was her job. You've got a gift, she said, sipping her tea. People are going to love this. I didn't just want to prove them wrong. I wanted to thrive without them. I wanted my son and his cold wife to hear about me from someone else, in a place where they'd least expect it. And they would. The day of the Makers Market, I arrived early and set up my booth. I called it Helen's Threads. Simple, honest. Just like me. The table was covered with a blue and white gingham cloth. My handmade goods were neatly arranged in baskets with handwritten tags. I even made a small sign stitched with heart sewn for you. By 10 a.m. the crowd had already gathered. Shoppers drifted from booth to booth, but something amazing happened. People didn't just look at my table, they stopped. They touched. They smiled. They asked questions. One young mom picked up a baby blanket and said, "This reminds me of what my grandma used to make." I smiled. It's made with the same kind of love. By noon, I'd sold half my inventory. By 3 p.m., I had nothing left. I sat there in the warm afternoon sun, stunned. My heart beat fast, not from fear but from something I hadn't felt in years: pride. That night, I opened a checking account under the name Helen's Threads and deposited my earnings. 3 weeks later, I had a simple website set up. By the end of the month, I had 5 custom orders and a local cafe asking if I could provide custom embroidered aprons for their staff. I didn't tell David or Emily. I didn't need to. But fate, she has a sense of humor. Because the very next week I bumped into Emily at the supermarket. She was pushing a cart with Emma inside. Emma waved and shouted, "Grandma." I waved back, warmth flooding my chest. Emily's face, oh, it was priceless. She looked me up and down like she expected me to be broken. lost, bitter. Instead, I stood there with clean clothes, a fresh haircut, and a canvas tote bag with my business logo printed across the front. We chatted briefly, just small talk, but I could see it in her eyes. The confusion, the discomfort, the fact that I was doing better without them, and she hated that. As she walked away, I saw her glance back at the bag again. Yeah, that's right. You threw me out. You called me dead weight. Now watch what I build from the pieces you left behind. You know what they don't tell you about starting over at 75. It's that you're stronger than they think you are. And sometimes stronger than even you think you are. After the first Maker's Market, my little side project became a lifeline. Helen's Threads wasn't just a business. It was me reclaiming everything they had chipped away at piece by piece. My time, my value, my pride. I started waking up earlier than I had in years. I'd put on a fresh pot of coffee in the little kitchen of the cottage, turn on the radio to my favorite 60s station, and start sewing before the sun had fully stretched across the garden outside. The orders came in slowly at first. Neighbors, local moms, an old friend from church who saw my apron photo online. But each order was a thread tying me back to the woman I had once been. Creative, capable, respected. Judy, the woman who rented me the cottage, became more than a landlord. She was my cheerleader, my taste tester, my surprise delivery driver. One day, she came in with a big smile. "Guess what?" she said, setting a cup of hot cocoa on the table. "My niece is an editor at Better Living. You know, that home and lifestyle magazine." I blinked. "Really?" "She saw the photos I posted of your potholders and loved them. Said she wants to feature you in the small business spotlight next month." I nearly dropped my coffee. "What?" Judy just grinned and patted my hand. "You better sew yourself something nice. You're about to get noticed." It was surreal, watching my little business go from folding table to full-page feature. The article came out 2 weeks later. There I was, sitting at my sewing machine, with the sun streaming in from the window, smiling at the camera like I belonged there. They called me a local legend in the making, said I was a perfect example of how age doesn't define worth. It felt validating, like the world saw me, even if my own son and his wife refused to. But it was what happened next that really shook things up. David called. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 2 months, not since I walked out of their house. The phone buzzed as I was finishing up an apron for a cafe downtown. I stared at his name on the screen for a full 30 seconds before answering. "Hello? Mom?" His voice was cautious, careful. "Hey, how are you?" I paused. Let the silence sit for a second. "I'm well, busy," he chuckled nervously. "Yeah, I saw the article. You're kind of famous now, huh?" "I'm doing something I love. That's all." More silence. "Well, Emma misses you," he said finally. "She keeps asking about your sewing. I was wondering if maybe we could come by and see you." There it was. The crack in their pride. The beginning of a climb down from that high horse. I agreed. But not for him, for Emma. They came over that Saturday. Emma ran straight into my arms. I held her so tight I thought I might break. She looked taller already. Wore a little necklace I'd sewn her months ago, but the tension between me and Emily was thick as soup. She stepped into the cottage and glanced around like she was expecting clutter or chaos. Instead, she found peace, warm light, order, joy. "Oh, this is cute," she said, setting her purse down like it might catch fire. "Thank you," I said coolly. I served lemon cake and iced tea. Emma bounced between the table and my sewing area, asking to learn how to make a scrunchie. Emily kept watching me, studying, like she was trying to figure out how the person she dismissed had turned into someone too bright to ignore. They didn't say it directly, but the look in Emily's eyes told me everything. She didn't like that I was thriving. I had been supposed to fade away, to shrink into the background until I was nothing more than a name on an outdated address. Instead, I was here, happy and building something meaningful. Before they left, David pulled me aside. "Listen, Mom, about what Emily said that day." I stopped him. "You didn't correct her," I said quietly. He opened his mouth, then shut it. "You didn't stand up for me when it mattered, David. And I can't forget that." "Not yet," he nodded slowly. "I understand." But did he? I don't know. A week later, the cafe downtown that had ordered aprons emailed me again. They wanted to host a Helen's Threads pop-up, complete with tea, pastries, and a sewing demonstration. It was their idea. "Customers love your stuff," they said. "They want to meet the lady behind the stitches." I laughed when I read that. Me? The lady behind the stitches? The event was scheduled for the second Sunday of the month. I invited Judy, some church friends, even a few of my former neighbors. I didn't invite David or Emily, but they came anyway. David stood near the back, looking proud but unsure. Emily wore sunglasses inside. Emma marched right up to the table and hugged me in front of everyone. "My grandma made my dress," she shouted. The room burst into smiles. That day was something I'll never forget. I signed aprons and napkins like I was someone special. And for once I felt like I was. But here's the thing about building yourself back up. People start to notice. People you didn't think were watching. A month after the pop-up, I got a call from a woman named Linda. She ran a chain of small boutique gift shops across 3 states. She had seen my story in Better Living and wanted to carry my work in 6 locations. 6. I had to sit down. She offered me a partnership deal. I'd retain creative control. She'd handle production scaling and distribution. I didn't say yes right away. Instead, I pulled out the folder where I'd kept all my late husband's documents, his inheritance, the house deed, the accounts, all of it still legally in my name. I had been quiet for too long, and it was time to use that power. I called my financial advisor and told him I wanted to move all my liquid assets under the Helen's Threads LLC. Then I called my lawyer. "Margaret," I said, "how soon can we make the house sale official?" "Ready when you are," she said. I hadn't even told David, but that house, the one they lived in and treated like their own, it wasn't theirs. It was mine, and I was done watching them treat me like furniture in a house they didn't even own. They were about to learn that dead weight doesn't just disappear. Sometimes it walks out with the deed in hand. You know, when you give someone everything, the roof over their head, food on the table, even the chair they sit in. You don't expect them to spit on your generosity, but they did. And now, I was done giving. When I married Thomas in 1971, we bought that house together. He laid the floorboards himself. I planted the lilacs along the side fence. We raised our son in that home, celebrated birthdays, Thanksgivings, and Christmases. Every room held a memory. After he passed, I couldn't bear to sell it, so I let David and Emily move in, thinking it would keep the home alive. But they didn't keep it alive. They drained it of kindness. They replaced my flower beds with concrete planters and let the paint on the shutters peel. They turned the warmth of our family home into something cold, functional, and sterile. A house with no soul. They never paid rent, never once said thank you. And yet, they acted like I was the one squatting on their property, an inconvenience they had to tolerate. Well, not anymore. I sat across from my lawyer, Margaret, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with sharp red nails and a keener sense of justice than anyone I'd ever met. She looked over the deed one last time, and then smiled. "You're still the sole owner, Helen. Your husband left everything to you in the will. You have every right to sell." "I want to do it quickly," I said. Quietly, too. "No warning." She nodded. "We'll set the closing for the end of the month. Do you have a realtor?" "I will by tomorrow." And I did. I met with Sandra, a kind-eyed woman in her 40s with a passion for historic homes. She was stunned when she saw the place. "This house is beautiful," she said, walking through the old front room. "Original crown molding? That's rare. We'll have no trouble selling it, especially with your name on the deed." She paused. "Are the current occupants aware?" I gave her a calm smile. "Not yet," she hesitated, then gave me a quiet nod. "Okay, let's make this painless." We listed the house privately. No big online splash, no for sale sign in the yard. Just a few calls to high-interest buyers Sandra had worked with before. Within 2 weeks, we had 3 offers. I chose the buyer not just for the price, but for the purpose. A retired couple from Vermont who wanted to move closer to their grandkids, their dream, to restore the home to what it once was. They loved the lilacs. That sealed it for me. I signed the papers on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, the deal was final, and by Monday, it was time to tell David. I called and asked him to meet me for lunch at a local diner we used to visit when he was a boy. I knew Emily wouldn't come. She'd never set foot in a place without avocado toast. He arrived looking puzzled. "Is something wrong?" he asked as he slid into the booth. "Sit down," I said gently. The waitress poured us coffee. I waited until she walked away before sliding a copy of the sale contract across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "The house has been sold," I said calmly. "The new owners will be moving in next month." He blinked. "Wait, what? You mean our house?" I took a long sip of my coffee. "No, Doed, my house, the one you've lived in, rent-free for 8 years. The one Emily said I had no right to walk through anymore. That house." His mouth opened and closed. His ears turned red. "You can't just—" "Mom, what about Emma? Her school, her room?" I looked him square in the eyes. "You had months to treat me like family. You chose not to. You let your wife call me dead weight. Now you'll have to figure things out, like I did when I had no place to go." "But why didn't you tell us first?" "Because you stopped listening a long time ago." He sat there in stunned silence, the contract still lying flat between us. I slid a small envelope across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "A check for Emma, to help with moving expenses or a new school uniform or whatever she needs. But don't mistake it for guilt. It's for her, not for you." His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a check for 5. "I don't want Emma to suffer for your choices," I said softly. David said nothing, just stared at the paper in his hand like it was a betrayal. But this wasn't betrayal. This was justice. After everything, I still gave him more grace than he ever gave me. When I stood to leave, he finally said something. "Mom, I never meant for things to get this bad." I paused. "You didn't stop them from getting worse either." I left him sitting there in that booth, slumped like a boy who'd been scolded. The woman who walked out of that diner wasn't a victim. She was a woman who had finally remembered her worth. The next few weeks passed quickly. I stopped by the house once to meet the buyers and give them the spare keys. Sandra came with me. Emily wasn't home. David opened the door with a look that could shatter glass. I smiled brightly. "Meet Hank and Marjorie," I said, gesturing to the couple behind me. "They'll be moving in soon." Hank extended a hand, looking forward to bringing some charm back to this place. David shook his hand stiffly, then turned and disappeared inside. I could hear Emily shouting something about what the hell is going on through the cracked window. I didn't flinch. I just handed Marjorie the keys, hugged her, and whispered, "Treat it with love." She smiled and nodded. "I already do." As I walked back to my car, I passed the old lilac bushes, now half dead from neglect. Still, I bent down and clipped a few sprigs. Dried, pressed, and preserved, they would remind me of what this house once meant to me, and how I reclaimed it one last time. That night, back in the cottage, Judy and I sat on the porch sipping iced tea. "So," she said, raising her glass, You really did it. I smiled. I did, and it felt like breathing for the first time. Funny how quiet your mind gets after you've done the unthinkable and survived it. I sold the house they thought they owned. The house I raised my son in. The house they slowly turned into a symbol of control. And now that chapter was over, sealed and signed with a real estate contract. And a new set of keys in the hands of people who respected its walls more than my own family ever did. And in that silence, after the adrenaline faded, something surprising bloomed inside me. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you're finally living your life on your own terms. I had spent so many years making myself smaller to fit inside other people's comfort zones, staying quiet to avoid rocking the boat, saying yes when I wanted to scream no. But now, I had a business, I had a roof over my head that no one could guilt me about, and I had freedom. And yet, despite all that, I still carried Emma's little face in my heart every day. She had written me a note after their visit to the cottage. It came in the mail 2 days after I told David the house was no longer theirs. Dear Grandma. It read in messy, half-cursive handwriting. I love you and I miss sewing with you. Mommy said you're busy now, but I hope I can come see you again soon. I'm wearing the scrunchie you made me every day. Love, Emma. I cried over that letter like a child. Not because it hurt, but because it reminded me why I'd made every hard decision in the first place. I hadn't left to be cruel. I left to survive. And now I had a new purpose. That week, I launched a new branch of my business. Nana kits, small sewing packages for kids and beginners, with easy instructions in cheerful fabric. Each one included a note card that said, "You're never too young or too old to create something beautiful." Emma was my first customer. I mailed her a kit with purple thread, a pack of flower buttons, and a blank tote bag to decorate. Along with it, I sent her a letter. Use these tools to build something all your own. That's how we remember who we are. A week later, I received a photo on my phone from an unknown number. It was Emma, beaming, holding up a crooked little tote with a giant felt heart stitched on the front. David must have sent it. No message, no apology, but I didn't need one. The stitches were her message. The smile was mine. Around that time, Judy and I hosted a small community open house at the cottage. I transformed the living room into a temporary shop, lined with folded aprons, hanging quilts, and hand-stitched tea towels. People came with curiosity and left with full shopping bags. I overheard a young woman whisper to her friend, "She's the one who made it into that magazine, right? The one whose family kicked her out." I didn't flinch. I just smiled and handed them both cookies. The best revenge, I'd come to learn, isn't shouting in someone's face. It's living well enough that they hear your success even when you say nothing at all. Still, I couldn't shake the idea that something bigger was calling to me. Not just sewing, teaching, sharing what I'd learned, not just about thread and fabric, but about survival, reinvention, and refusing to stay invisible. So I started pitching a class. Judy helped me post flyers at the library, the grocery store, and even the post office. Beginner sewing with Helen. Bring your story, stitch it into strength. I expected maybe 3 or 4 sign-ups. I got 16. 16 women, ranging from a 12-year-old girl with shy eyes to a 68-year-old widow who said she hadn't sewn since her mother passed away. They came in with more than just fabric. They came in with loss, with disappointment, with hope they barely recognized. Each week we sat in a circle and stitched. Not just quilts or aprons, but wounds. Stories came out in whispers. Divorces, layoffs, neglectful children, abusive partner. And week by week, we stitched ourselves into something stronger. One night, after class, the widow, her name was Diane, came up to me. "I thought I came here to remember how to sew," she said, touching the quilt square in her lap. "But I think I came here to remember me." And in that moment, I realized that's exactly what I'd done too. At the end of the course, I hosted a showcase. We hung everyone's finished pieces on a laundry line outside the cottage, strung from the porch to the old oak tree. Families came, husbands brought flowers, daughters took selfies with their mothers, strangers clapped as stories were read aloud, one by one, and in the middle of it all stood me, no longer invisible, no longer anyone's burden, just a woman who had the courage to say, I looked out over the crowd, thinking of all the versions of myself I'd left behind. The quiet one, who asked permission. The tired one, who waited for someone to see her. The broken one, who believed she didn't deserve better. They were gone now, stitched into the lining of a life I'd finally made for myself. The sun dipped low behind the tree line, casting a golden light across the yard. Emma ran up to me, now wearing a handmade skirt she'd sewn from one of the Nana kits. "Grandma, I want to show you my stitches." I bent down and hugged her tight. "You already have, sweetheart," I whispered. "And they're beautiful." Freedom has a funny taste, like fresh baked bread after years of being fed scraps. It's warm, filling, a little bittersweet, and once you've had it, you never forget. I used to think freedom came with money, or a house in your name, or the power to shut a door behind you. But now I know it's much quieter than that. Freedom is peace in your bones, and that's what I had now, or so I thought. The day I got the letter from David, I was sorting fabric in the workroom. The envelope had his handwriting, shaky, like he didn't know how to talk to me anymore. I sat down on the old floral couch and opened it carefully. It wasn't long. "Mom, I know I've hurt you. I know Emily has too. Emma misses you. I think about the house every day." I thought I could control everything. But now I realize I lost the one person who always believed in me. "I'm sorry, David." I held that letter in my hands for a long while. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally didn't need to say anything. You see, I'd spent too many years handing out forgiveness like candy, hoping it would change something. But forgiveness isn't about fixing the other person, it's about freeing yourself. Still, I wrote back, "David, I don't need an apology. I needed respect. And now, I have it. From myself. I'll always love you, but I won't return to a place where I wasn't wanted. If you're ready to start over, not with guilt, but with action, my door is open, just not the one you thought I'd be trapped behind. Love, Mom." I mailed it that afternoon. It rained the next morning. The kind of soft, slow rain that makes everything smell like spring even if it's still winter. I opened the shop for my Saturday students and made extra lemon bars for the ladies who always snuck seconds. Midway through the class, a familiar car pulled up. David stepped out alone. I kept my hands steady as he walked through the door, looking around like a boy entering a sacred space. "Nice place," he said softly. I nodded. "Thank you. I got your letter," he added. "I understand." He looked older, not grayer, not wrinkled, but tired, like the weight of who he'd become was finally catching up to him. "I just wanted you to know," he continued. "Emily and I were separating. I didn't say anything. That wasn't my business to dissect. I kept thinking I had to hold everything together by force," he said, "even if it meant pushing you out. But Emma, she asks about you every week. She says you listen better than anyone, and she's right." He looked down. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "I already did," I said. He looked up, surprised. "Forgiveness isn't a door back into my life," I added, "but it is a way to stop holding hate in my heart." He nodded. "Can we visit sometime?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked the back room and returned with a small box. Inside was a sewing kit, a father-daughter beginner pack. "I thought you could start with this," I said. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I want Emma to keep creating even when I'm not around." He took the box slowly, as if it might vanish. "Thank you," he whispered. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but as he walked out into the rain, I knew something had changed. Not just in him, in me, because I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission anymore. Not to teach, not to give, and certainly not to walk away when I needed to. Later that week, I hosted an open mic night at the cottage for women in my sewing group. We called it Threaded Stories. They read aloud journal entries, poems, even stories stitched into quilt panels. One woman, a retired nurse named Sharon, read a piece called The Door I Closed. Another, a single mom named Erica, held up a scarf she'd made from her ex-husband's old shirt. "I turned pain into purpose," she said, "and it's warmer than I expected." We all laughed, but it wasn't just joy in that room. It was healing. I sat there in the circle, watching these women rise, one by one, sharing the broken pieces they'd sewn into something beautiful. And I felt it again. That quiet, steady peace. That freedom, that strength. After everyone left, Judy came and sat beside me on the porch. "You ever imagine you'd be here?" she asked. I looked out at the dark, starlit sky. "Never," I said. "But I also never imagined I'd let go of needing to be needed." She smiled. "Well, for what it's worth, you're needed here." And I realized, for the first time, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Not in my son's house, not under anyone's rule, but in my own skin. Stitch by stitch, I'd made something stronger than revenge. I'd made a lot. I wake up that morning to the scent of lavender soap and the sound of my own breath. No yelling, no slamming cupboard doors, no muttered complaints about how I forgot to do something. Just peace. It still startles me sometimes. The quiet, the calm. You don't realize how loud cruelty is until it's gone. I pad across the wooden floor of the cottage, wrap myself in a soft shawl, and watch the sunrise from the window. I can see the reflection of my face in the glass, older. Yes, wrinkled, sure, but strong. Clear-eyed. Proud. The life I've stitched together isn't extravagant. It isn't flashy, but it's mine. Every inch of it built by my hands and my backbone. And now the world is starting to notice. 3 days ago, I got an email from a local radio station. They want to interview me about the sewing classes, the community I've built, and the business I resurrected after it was tossed away like garbage. They called it an inspiring story of resilience. I almost laughed when I read that. Because to me, it's just survival. It's doing what women have done forever. Making something out of nothing. Stitching beauty out of scraps. But I agreed. Not for attention. Not for praise. For every woman out there who thinks it's too late. That same day, Emma arrived at my doorstep. David brought her by for a weekend visit. He stood on the porch with her, holding a small overnight bag, eyes full of nervousness and guilt. He didn't try to come inside. "I told her to call me if she needs me," he said quietly. "And I told her to listen to you." I nodded once. Then I knelt down and looked into that little girl's face. Her mother's eyes, her father's chin, my spirit. "You ready to sew something?" I asked. She grinned and hugged me like I was made of gold thread. That weekend, we stitched more than fabric. We cooked from scratch. We read under blankets. We made a mess with glitter glue. And on the second night, we made brownies. And I let her lick the spoon. Something Emily never allowed. "I like it here," Emma said. "You don't get mad when things are messy." I swallowed hard. "Some of the best things in life start messy, sweetheart." She nodded, like she understood more than her age should allow. Before bedtime, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack. "I made this for you." It was a drawing, me and her standing outside the sewing cottage, hearts above our heads. In her shaky handwriting it said, "Grandma is my thread." I put that drawing on my fridge right next to the radio fly. That night, while she slept, I sat alone in my sewing chair, staring at the stars through the open window. I thought about Emily, how she once told me I was dead weight. I thought about how heavy that phrase sat on me for weeks, like an invisible boulder pressing into my chest. But now I know better. I wasn't dead weight. I was an anchor. I kept that house grounded, that family fed, that child loved. And when they let go of me, they drifted. The next morning, I drove Emma to the park before David picked her up. As we sat on a bench watching ducks float across the water, she asked me a question. Why did Mommy say you couldn't live with us anymore? I took a deep breath. Sometimes, I said gently, people forget how much others do for them. And when they forget, they say things that hurt. Do you still love her? She asked. Yes, I said, without hesitation. But I love me too. And sometimes loving yourself means walking away from people who don't treat you right. Emma nodded slowly. I don't think you're dead weight, I smiled. Neither do I. David pulled up in the car. Emma gave me one last hug and climbed into the back seat, still clutching the tote bag we decorated together. David met my eyes before he got in. We're working on things, he said. She's not the same since you left. I didn't respond, because I wasn't the same either, and that was a good thing. Later that month, the radio interview aired. I thought it might go unnoticed, just a blip on a quiet Sunday morning, but by Monday, my inbox was flooded. Emails from women across the state. Some my age, some younger, telling me their own stories of being erased, overlooked, dismissed. One woman wrote, "My daughter calls me a burden. You reminded me I'm a foundation." Another wrote, "I've been scared to leave my son's house, but now I think I can." They called me brave, but I wasn't brave. I was just done being afraid. Judy came by that week with a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 flutes. To the woman who stitched her own justice, she said. We toasted in the garden, and I knew deep in my bones that I had changed more than my own story. I had opened the door for others to change theirs. The inheritance they thought I stole. It was never about the money. It was about the legacy, the lesson, the truth. I wasn't dead weight, I was the seed, and now I was blooming. In a world of noise, I chose quiet strength. In a family of users, I chose dignity. And in a life where I was told to stay small, I expanded. So if you ever feel like you're just the extra, the afterthought, the obligation, don't wait for them to see your worth. Take your thread, patch your wounds, and stitch yourself a brand new beginning. Because you are not dead weight. You are the force holding it all together until the day you finally let go and fly.